Welcome to Amplify, the personal brand business show. Today on the show, Bob is speaking with Kris Ward.
So I'm just here to tell you, they come in all shapes and forms, but you know what? If you're working more than a 25, 30-hour work week and you're not having fun in your business and your business isn't supporting your life, it's consuming it, you know what? It's just about getting your ideas to execution. And the delay of doing that is just choking you financially. It's choking the freedom. It's killing you. It's killing everything that matters to you, maybe slowly, maybe quickly.
Hi there, and welcome back to the Personal Brand Business Show. My name is Bob Gentle, and every week I speak to incredible people who share their secrets to building, marketing, and monetizing their expertise and the mindset you need for your business to grow and thrive. If you're new to the show, then while you still have whatever device that is in your hand, I say this every week, so I know you're on autopilot. You're putting your phone away. Pull it out again, take it out, and hit the plus button in the top right-hand corner. I think that's where it is. And if it's on Spotify, I think it's follow. That way you won't miss a single thing. So this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Kris Ward. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So we are going to be talking about probably the most important thing in business. It's something I hear clients complain about all the time. It's probably the number one most moaned about malady in business. And it's, how do we get more done, feel like we're doing less, and really enjoy running our businesses and not feel that our businesses are running us? And I almost feel like I've introduced you. However, I haven't. So for the listener who's meeting you for the first time, could you start by maybe just telling us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do for your clients?
Yeah, so I help entrepreneurs stop working so hard, and I help them with their team, their time, and their toolkits. And how this unfolded for me was when I started my business 14 plus years ago, my focus was market messaging, and I was doing all that marketing type stuff. And the first couple of years I was in business, I worked insane hours. And my husband said I was always stealing from sleep, getting up earlier and earlier and staying later and later. And I was told about the 2-year mark that I was starting to lose some of my charm. And I thought, oh my gosh, I was exhausted all the time. And I thought, this cannot be. Like, there was my biggest fan. He was always supporting me, cheering me on. And now I'm just exhausted and tired and short-tempered all the time. And I thought, okay, this has got to change. And so I literally went from working 16 hours a day down to 6. Now, that did not happen overnight. That's a whole story on its own. But luckily I did, because a couple of years after that, my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer, and I was pulled away from the business for about 2 years. And when I returned after his passing, my existing clients had no idea of my absence. It was just not how he navigated his journey. We were very positive in nature, and the local business community didn't know. And so people kept coming to me and saying, like, how could we have not known your way? And then they started to say to me, like, well, if you could do that, maybe you could help us, under that capacity. Maybe we get to our kids' soccer games and start visiting our friends and family again. And so I started to work with them under that capacity. And I realized really quickly that the people who needed me most were the ones who looked good on paper. They had been in business 5, 10 years, and, they're out of what I call the startup stage, but they're still working way too many hours for where they are at this point in their journey. And so that's how it unfolded. And my clients tell me all the time that they get 25 hours back a week and working with us. And yeah, it's just, I passionately believe that your business should support your life, not consume it.
That sounds great. I'll put it, and you and I have clients in common, so I know this works. However, I'm a team of me to an extent. My wife looks after the money and the admin in the business, so it's not like I'm alone. And I have people in the business who do little tasks. For example, podcast editing. He would probably argue it's not a little task. If you're listening, I'm sorry. It's not a little task. I have nothing but the deepest respect for the podcast editing. But I am busy.
Yeah.
But I look at all the things that I do and I think, I'm the only person who can do this. Now, there's some of it that's true. Some of it I'm very aware is limiting belief. And what's interesting is there's probably lots of things that I'm not doing in the business that I could be doing if I had more time that would actually matter more. How do you approach somebody who has limiting beliefs around their ability to delegate effectively because they think they're superhuman. What does that process of changing people's
Well,
mindset around that look like?
I'm not sure you're going to like my answer because I'm not here to change anybody's mind. So if you think you're the only one who can do it, good luck to you, is all I can say, right? So what I will do though is I will address a couple of things that you've said. First of all, I think we do get confused that what happens is whatever our zone of genius is, whatever the work that we do for our clients, there is a certain amount of work there. And then there's the pre and the post work. I don't care if you're a brain surgeon, there's pre and post work to everything. So what happens is maybe your work takes 1 hour and then you think, oh, there's just this stuff I have to do before I meet with that client. It's like 10, 15 minutes. And then there's a processing of that afterwards. That's another, oh, that's no big deal. I can do it myself. That takes 15 minutes. Well, that's a half hour. And how many clients do you have, right? So every client that I've ever dealt with does come to me with a certain amount of, well, there's some stuff I can hand off, but there's only so much. We even had one client, she's a designer, and she's like, Kris, I walk into a room and yes, there's other designers, but mostly her position was that people have too much stuff in the room, too much furniture. And she said, I just see the rooms. Like, there's no way I can delegate that. Now, let me put a pin in there for a second, because I will also say, to me, delegating is a lateral move. The work still has to come through you. So delegating is not something we do. We do it very differently. But let me continue this story. So when we started working with this designer, I'm like, okay, so you're the only one that could do this. So we took a look at her appointments. On average, her appointments were about an hour and 45 minutes. We started to break it down and look at stuff. And when we looked at it, of course, there was pre and post work. There always is, right? And we looked at that and we broke it down. And so what happened was, now we were getting her down to 45-minute appointments. And it was easier on the client and easier on her because she wasn't doing any admin stuff for 10, 15 minutes when she got there. She was going right into her area of expertise, her creative element. You know, that's a different part of her brain than filling out forms, right? And it made it much easier on the client, to the point that then she started scheduling all her morning designer stuff. And now she does big speaking gigs in the afternoon. She MCs large events, you know, like with celebrities off HGTV in the States and stuff like that. So, you know, she'd be the first to say it changed the whole trajectory of her business when there's all these things that she thought she couldn't hand off. So I work with clients around the globe in all different industries. And I'm here to tell you, there is always stuff that others can do, if nothing else, to prepare you to do the thing that people are paying you for.
It's very interesting. I realized I jumped straight into delegating, and everything you've described there in terms of delegation, as you're speaking, I'm reflecting, I'm thinking, duh. If I were to look at what I do, for example, and how I do it, I'm thinking, what's my competitive advantage? My competitive advantage is that I pay attention, I'm attentive, and I'm great. I put my hands up, I'm great. And probably everybody listening is great. But if I were thinking to myself, how could I really stand out? And this will be true of everyone listening. It's by providing a VIP experience.
Yeah.
It's by providing a next level service. And for me right now, to provide a next level service will take me double the time. It would potentially allow me to double my business, but it would require double the time. And like everybody else, I don't have the time to spend more time. So delegation matters, and I can see a way through where that would be tremendously valuable. But obviously that's just delegation. In terms of your process working with clients, it's not just going to be delegation. So what does an engagement with you normally look like? How does that usually play out?
Okay, so again, I want to push back, if that's okay with you. I'll do that a lot.
That's why you're here.
I would argue that if you wanted to add a VIP service, it would not double your work. And again, there would be pre and post work that you would be shocked how you can, and we've done this many clients, turn it into a VIP service, and it does not double your work with the setups we have. So we do work, we help our clients with their team, their time, and their toolkits. So what that means, their team. First of all, to me, team is a philosophy, not a number. So you can have an amazing virtual assistant for $5 an hour. We actually find, hire, and onboard them for you. We do that because that's a whole thing on its own, and we can teach you how to do it, but we just don't want that learning curve when we want to get to the real work. So we do find, hire, on board for our clients. We've got 90% retention rate. And then what happens, why you're not delegating, why you're not, because delegating is just like you're the bottleneck still. And it's kind of like if you think back to the corporate days, Bob, if you were like really good at sales and they said, we want you to be the sales manager. Well, the first thing you'd be doing is stopping doing sales. You'd be managing the people, right? And we don't have that time when we have our own business. I don't have time to manage a team. I frankly need them managing me. So that lends itself to us teaching people, how to use their calendar. 90% of people use that wrong. And then also our super toolkits. Our super toolkits are our signature program. They're very different than SOPs. Standard operating procedures are clunky in nature, time consuming to make. They're traditionally written by they're traditionally just there to cover liability and not written by the end user. And they just take a lot of time, right? So with these super toolkits, once we find, hire, on board a virtual assistant for you, and we put them through our leadership program, and we're not following the parentified model of the corporate world where I'm like your parent, when you had a manager, they were like your parent or your teacher, and you're the student and child, and they're checking on you. That's not how we operate, right? So with the team, with the time, and with the super toolkits, it just gives you constant bandwidth back on your calendar so that you do have more and more time to focus on more and more important work, because there's always going to be that next thing. When I wrote my book, When the Hour, Win the Day, oh my gosh, I thought a parade would be in my honor when the book was done. Like, oh my gosh, the book is done. Get the drums banging. This is a parade. But then, oh no, I now need to promote the book. I need to pitch to be on podcast. I need to be on podcast. So then I need more and more time on my calendar. You always think, well, once I get to that next thing, things will be different. Ding, ding, ding. If you've ever said that, that's a problem. You need help. And so there's always going to be another thing. So what happens is the super toolkits, what makes them very different is their ease of use and how they're really dynamic documents that constantly give you more and more efficiency and give you back time. And that lets you get to the next thing. So really, it's some basic infrastructure that most people don't have in play that allow you to get from out of startup, out of being stagnant, and into scalability. And the scale isn't just about doing a lot more work in less time. It's about you doing more important work and bringing in more revenue in what I call school hours.
I think this is one of the things that I notice a lot is people are so busy firefighting, they never have time for the work that actually moves the needle.
Yeah.
And they think they're busy, they think they're being productive, but the things that they're doing are the things that are required just to stand still. Yes. And if a major accomplishment for you isn't moving backwards that day, fair enough. But we all want more. We all want growth. We all want to move towards the business of our dreams. And if we want more, then we have to accomplish more. We have to be more effective. We have to be more valuable. And by just doing the same as we did yesterday and the day before and the day before that, which is getting through the day, checking off boxes, and not sliding backwards, that's not the way.
Oh my gosh, you're articulating that beautifully. Really, that is so profound, everything you just said. And what I would say too, here's something, I call it the 3Ds. So when you say, Bob, like, oh, there's just me and I'm fine. And then I say, okay, let's just do some basic math. Let's say you could sell a package for $100, right? So what I want you to understand is the 3Ds: damaging overhead, delayed income, diminished opportunity. Damaging overhead is you. Every time that you're not out there bringing in business that you could sell, here's my $100 package, then you are in reality billing your company $100 for that admin chore that you're doing, that low level, repetitive admin chore that you're doing. Okay. So now damaging overhead, you're the most expensive damaging overhead. Okay. Now Delayed income. How much does it cost you when you got a client in June that you could have had in January? 6 months. And then also, what if they referred you to just one person? And then the most painful of them all, I think, is diminished opportunity. When somebody says, oh my gosh, Bob, I didn't know you did this. I just locked in with somebody else. And what was the lifetime value of that potential client? So you are missing out on all these things when you are doing the busy work, thinking you're the one that has to do it. And you're just, you're just not out there taking your business to the next level.
So the super toolkits, I think we've got people convinced that, yeah, probably they could do more if they were smarter with how they use their time. For me, my personal experience has been bringing on help.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is there's often a lot of friction.
Mm-hmm.
And when that friction is expensive, it's expensive friction. Now, obviously, you're talking about $5 an hour. Most people can afford to swallow that for a while. But even when it's not necessarily expensive, having somebody that you have to keep teaching the same thing over and over to is just more work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sensing this is where the super toolkits come in. So,
well, it's bigger than that as well. Because we hire and onboard the virtual assistants and we immediately put them into the leadership program. So it's a whole different philosophy. And we teach, our clients and everybody there how to communicate, how to do daily scrums, 15-minute meetings instead of 1 hour a week, and all these clunky things that we're used to in the corporate world, right? The leadership program is a big part of it. So let's say I'm teaching you're my client, and I'm teaching you about the super toolkits. Also, the virtual assistant that I found for you, they go through the learning center, and I'm teaching them about super toolkits as well as they get leadership training every month, and they've got all this stuff going on so that they can because the confusion with leadership is people get the idea, like, if I'm a leader, I can create influence on others and kind of make them do what I want them to do. When you have people that all have really great leadership skills, if you were to check in on my morning scrum meeting or any of my clients, what will happen is you'd have a hard time telling who's in charge, who writes the checks, because I really show up and act as if I am surrounded by really smart peers. Like, I go to them as a resource, like, oh my gosh, this is a great idea, right? So the babysitting is an old school philosophy from the corporate world, and we do the exact opposite of that. So it's a whole different thing. So to your point, you're right. It doesn't matter if they're free. If you have to take all this time to train them and retrain them and do all this foolishness, it's time consuming. It sucks the soul out of you. It's very frustrating, right? This is freedom at its best. And it's it's like talking about walking versus, I don't know, driving a car. That's the difference in those two.
So in your experience, there are people that you can look at and think, I know you think you could probably work in this way, but it's probably not for you. And then there are others you look at and you think, I wish you would call me. I could help you so much. Who's a hell yes and who's a hell no?
I guess the hell yes I'm really lucky. I work with a lot of smart people around the globe, and they're in all different niches. I mean, I just started working with this client of mine that I had no idea. I'm like, I'm not sure why you think you need me, but he is a lawyer and he has 70 lawyers in his firm, and they're around the globe and like in different countries like South America and England and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking, well, what do you need me for? Like, you got it going on. Well, he does a lot of speaking gigs. He's written a book. And so he's got them all set up, although he would argue not as effectively as he'd like. And then he was saying, and there were lawyers that deal with corporations like bank projects and stuff. So it's not like criminal law or anything. It's very strategic. But he was saying, I have all these ambitions and I can't manage myself. And I'm like, all right, I can help you. So the stuff that we're teaching him with his calendar, we found a VA for him. We're doing all this stuff. He's like, this is brilliant. And now he's taking it to his bigger team. So I would argue what happens is most of the people I work with look good on paper. They might be in business 5-10 years. They might have no team. They might have a couple of people, whatever, but they're still working way too many hours for where they are at this point in their journey. They should be working 4-day weeks. They should be having longer weekends in the summer. They should have very dependable vacations, and they should have consistency and and rhythm in their business and excitement about the next project, and not still in that, no one person knows how many hours I work stage.
Yeah. So when we're looking at bringing on a VA, for example, it's just saying VA to me feels a little bit cliched, but let's call it what I think a lot of people are accustomed to hearing it called. What does a typical engagement look like? Is it full-time, part-time? What's
That's
normal?
a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So I always say to my clients, even if you had $1 million, I would not start the virtual assistant off in the beginning full time, because you're not ready for them. We're going to set you up. So we tend to start them off very slow. It might be an hour or two a day. And then as we put things in play, because that's another thing that goes wrong, is you're like, oh my gosh, it's almost like a toddler. I got to come up with all this work. I come in Sunday, get all this work ready to give them something to amuse them for the week, right? And that's where it backfires. And then it's like the tail wagging the dog. So we work with them and you, and we take it really slowly, and we just build up so that you're just getting relief. And all my clients will say, like, it just pays for itself. I have one client, Christine, and she was really interesting because I don't encourage it, but lots of times when people are just in a hot mess, like you say, a firefighter, and they're all over the place, they reach out to me and like, hey, can we talk? And then sometimes they miss the first appointment because they have no control of their calendar. I'm not saying it's okay, but it happens. So she missed the second appointment, and I thought, okay, who's the fool? We're done. But she had been a referral from somebody that I knew very well. And I was like, they're like, Kris, give her another chance. I'm like, all right. And she swore, I promise I'll show up for the third appointment. I promise. So she showed up. And the funny thing was, she helped like $5-10 million companies, 50 to 500, get ready to sell their business. And she said, I teach them systems. Like, how can you help me? To another point, Bob, so many people think, Kris, you don't understand. There's just too much work. It's not about I'm doing this well. Because a lot of the clients I work with, they get stuff done. They're the go-to person for a lot of people in their life. We're not talking low functioning people. We're talking smart people that get stuff done, but there's still too much to do. And that was her position. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So we worked together, and we did hire and onboard a virtual assistant for her, which I have a clipping from our session. I think it's on LinkedIn and our website. And she was saying, like, within the first week, she said Rika, the VA we found for her, had paid for herself for the year, she said, because just some loose ends that she had found some things in LinkedIn, some messaging that turned into a contract. There's just a whole bunch of stuff. Now, in case you think that's just a fluke, I will also tell you, when Christine started working with us, she told me later she was on some sort of sleep meds because her adrenaline was so high, her cortisol was all over the place. She was working insane hours. She was exhausted. Within the year, her income went up 4 times, and she was working 1/5 of the time, like 1/5 the hours she was before. And she went to Costa Rica for a month with no Wi-Fi, and the virtual assistant ran the business. And we've got clippings from her coaching, just chatting about this, not even a rehearsed testimonial. So I'm just here to tell you, they come in all shapes and forms. But you know what? If you're working more than a 25, 30-hour work week, and you're not having fun in your business, and your business isn't supporting your life, it's consuming it, you know what? It's just about getting your ideas to execution. And the delay of doing that is just choking you financially. It's choking the freedom. It's killing you. It's killing everything that matters to you, maybe slowly, maybe quickly.
So a question I think probably a lot of people wouldn't ask is, some people are kind of uncomfortable about hiring people from overseas at low hourly rates. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that some people are uncomfortable with it, and some people look at it as, this is great, I can get people to work really cheap. They are using it as, it is almost abusive. Integrity is important here. And there are lots of different ways that you can engage with a VA. And I'm interested in your perspective on the moral side of this. What's the VA's experience? Because it's them that matters.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. Oh my gosh, I can't wait so much to talk about here. So when I started doing this long before anybody else, like, there wasn't platforms, there wasn't all that's going on that there is now. And I ran into that, and I found, like you, I'm like, I don't want to exploit somebody. I want to do this. And I remember talking to somebody who was from the Philippines who lived over here in North America. And she was kind of outraged to me. She said, how dare you put your morals on her? Like, we decide that we're all going to live in a family home, and that's how we live generationally, and you don't, right? Like, we have things that matter to us that don't matter to you. How dare you decide that we're living a lesser life? And I was like, all right, okay, quite didn't get that. But what I will say is, their minimum wage is something around 10 US dollars a day over there. And the roads are incredibly dangerous. They have to drive far. They also, a lot of them have what they call workaways. So you go somewhere all week to work and then you come home on the weekend. So now you're offering them $5 an hour to stay from a home office. And what I would say is they all become the breadwinners in their family. That's a very big deal. And the big thing that was explained to me as well is the rich people have a car. The other ones have like motorbikes and stuff, not motorcycles, little scooters, right? So now I'm dealing with my team and my clients' teams that all own a car. They're the breadwinner in their family. They're safe. They're not on these dangerous roads. It's just a whole, I mean, they're living the life, right? So to them, this is a beautiful world. And in addition, we are not an agency. Why I tell you that is agencies, if you hire an agency for a virtual assistant, couple things happen. They don't set you up. They just give you somebody, they make the resumes all look the same. They send you someone, they're looking for billable hours. If you love your virtual assistant and you're with them for 2 years and you're paying the agency these big fees, and then you want to end the contract, you lose your virtual assistant. But more than anything, the virtual assistant has to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And so you think you're paying the agency, whatever, $15 an hour. More often than not, they're getting $3 and $4 an hour, sometimes 2. So with us, when I find, hire, and board a virtual assistant, you pay them directly the full amount. That has nothing to do with me. I don't make money off that. Okay. So, and then we put them through the leadership program. We don't have them working overnights. There's a lot of perks that we put in play with us that they want to stay with us forever, but it's really quite a life, and they quite enjoy being the breadwinner.
I think that's important to acknowledge, because, like you said, it's very easy to project our own standards, but not understanding that things are culturally and economically very different. And you could be the difference maker in somebody's life. That's
exactly it. And that was a really great question. But to be looking at somebody and saying they're now the breadwinner in their family because of you, that's exciting times.
So I'm curious to ask about your business now. I think the finding, onboarding, and that side of things, that's obviously how you generate your revenue. So when you work with a client, what does that typically look like? I mean, if people want to know about money, they can go and speak to you personally, which I would encourage them to do, because it is a VIP experience, I have heard. But practically speaking, what does that engagement of, hey, Kris, I need some help, through to actually having somebody deployed look like?
Yeah, thank you. It really is a VIP experience. I'm going to use a lot of your words moving forward. I should have you do like whatever, MC an event.
You'd think I was in marketing, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So yes, so a couple of things happen. We do find, hire, and board virtual assistants for you. You do get daily access to me. What that looks like is we communicate through Voxer, right? Now, if for any reason you get stuck or you have a question, you need to hammer something out, we hop on a Zoom. We found over time that if I was worth my salt and I'm meeting with someone once a week on Zoom, and I'm working all this stuff in your company, and it is very customized. We work on your stuff. I don't have this I have a loose agenda, but it's very customized to what you're doing, what your next big ambition is, your project, whatever. Anyhow, what I found is if I'm worth my salt, I'm dumping all that on you in a week, and then we meet next week. With Voxer, we go back and forth every day. So I'm getting things real time, not in a recap. If you're stuck, oh my gosh, I have a quick question. So it's just beautiful. So you get daily communication with me. I hop in and answer it once a day. Then I would say, okay, that's a really great question, Bob. So what I want you to watch is these 3 videos in the Academy. And our long videos are about 5 minutes. And it's just so that I don't have to re-explain everything, or that you get the same messaging as everybody else if I'm teaching something, or it's a how-to, or it's a show and tell, right? While I'm doing all that, the virtual assistant I found, hired, and onboarded for you, they're going through videos in the Learning Center. They're meeting for the live training once a month in the leadership program. They're submitting weekly videos and weekly super toolkits to get them audited so I can they can learn faster and do more for your company. there's just a lot going on. You can send me a Scrum meeting videotape. I'll review it and say, okay, it was really great how you spoke to your team. Here's some things I'd improve. So it's really like having me in your pocket, in your business, all hours of the day, just making the minor tweaks that are going to get you unbelievable results.
What I love about this is I used to employ a reasonable number of people. And if they're listening, I acknowledge I was a terrible manager because nobody ever showed me how to do it.
Yeah.
Nobody ever, I was successful. I was good at what I did, and I needed people, and I hired people. Some of them I kept longer than I should. And the people who got to stay will acknowledge that. You should have done that much sooner, Bob. The people that were awesome, I didn't really empower them the way that I could have. And I could have done lots of things differently. And what I love about the model that you operate is not, there's your VA, good luck.
Yeah.
But it's, there's your VA, and we're going to help you manage them. We're going to train you to get the best out of them. And we're going to train them to give you the best. It's really supporting at both ends. And that's something you don't usually get outside of a corporate environment.
Well, I will say humbly that we do it very different than anybody out there. And also I would say it's actually the opposite of a corporate environment, because as we talked about earlier, it's very parentified, right? So we don't want any part of that previous situation of it being parentified. And that lawyer I spoke of earlier, he said to me, oh my gosh, I went to school, I went to law school, I did all these things, but nobody taught me how to run a business. And that's the thing, is hiring, training, putting systems in play. That's a whole thing on its own. So here's this lawyer, smart, educated, got a high level of education. He can't go learn a whole new career and stuff it in between his things he's hopping around on his calendar. Nor could I go learn law in between the stuff I'm doing. But we get this false sense as we're growing the business, it's, we go from 2 clients to 12, that it's naturally going to fall into play somehow in infrastructure, and it doesn't. And that's what chokes you, costs you time and money, exhausts you, discourages you. And I think when we go from startup, where you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I went from nothing to something, then it's really confused when you're in what I call the stagnant stage of, oh gosh, I did so much with nothing. How come I can't get out of this stage to the scalable stage where it's not always me pushing the rock uphill, but it's a whole different kettle of fish, and it's a whole nother career that I have, eaten, slept, consumed, done everything to make this something very different. You've got VA agencies out there that are not a good fit. You've got people then that talk to you about systems, and they're heavy and complicated and templates. It's like Weight Watchers, but then they don't show you how to hire someone. And then if they do, there's no support. So we do really come at it 360 all the way, constantly over delivering and looking at any hole in the system we fill, because we just want you. So many people have been crazy generous with their words with me. They're like, oh my gosh, you saved my life. You gave me my life back. You saved my marriage. And it's like, I fell back in love with my business. It's clean thinking instead of noisy thinking. I felt like a pilot driving a bus. I couldn't get anywhere. And then people start thinking, oh, if I was more disciplined, if I was more organized, and then they have all these perceived character flaws, when it's like looking at a chicken and yelling at it because it can't fly. It's like, yeah, that's not what you're meant to do.
So my last question really around the VA side of things. I heard somebody once talking about VAs and saying you should hire for the task and not for the role. And what they meant by that was if you have a technical role, like you need somebody to do website updates, hire somebody for that. And then if you want somebody to support you in your marketing, hire for that. But obviously, nobody wants to be hiring lots of people and fracturing their attention in the number of people they support. So how do you approach deciding what people should delegate first? Or can you train people to be more versatile? Or how should somebody approach this kind of thing?
Yeah. So first of all, I believe a team is a philosophy, not a number. So you can have a team of 1. However, you bring up a really good point. We want to make sure that somebody doesn't start off working with you and then you say, oh, they're really good at this, they're really good at admin. So then I'll have them do a little social media, and then I'll do a little copyright. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, they're not so good anymore, because I asked them to do 10 different things from 10 different careers and I diluted it. At the same time, I don't believe in big teams. I don't believe you need 5, 6, 7 people. I mean, I have 4 people on my team, but we're really robust and we do a lot of things. I have a podcast and a book and I have all these clients and speaking gigs and stuff like that. So to me, for my lifestyle, that's a large team. So again, I think it falls into the super toolkits, into Scrum meetings, into our leadership program, that there is a capacity and ability to streamline a lot of things and then not go as in many directions as you think you need. But yes, being strategic and purposeful about the team that you're building out, that is a misstep that a lot of people make. It's like either they dump too much on one person or they've got too many people coming and going, and that's just like chaos, right? So we've taken care of that with all the things that we have in play.
I think, again, this is probably one of the reasons why having somebody in the background to help steer you with this so you don't make decisions and just annoy your help and alienate people is very important, because my experience with staff, especially virtual staff, is they often won't tell you when they're not happy. And so somebody to look over your shoulder and say, they may not be telling you they're unhappy, but I guarantee you they're unhappy because you're overextending them.
And to that point, it is a really good point, and that's a big part of what we do, but also teaching you, like, so somebody else, one of my clients, they sent me their daily Scrum, a quick little video, and they're saying, okay, do this. And I said, okay, you have to train them that when you dump something on them to say, okay, I'm going to take a note of that. Don't just start dumping all these instructions on them and either expect they're looking at you, not wanting to look away, so they're not taking notes, or then they have to replay it and get it transcribed and kind of go. No, they have to be able to say, all right, thank you, Bob, I'll take note. And when I say I'll take note, you stop talking. So there's little things that we don't even get to the point of this person's not unhappy. We just set them up so they're happy. So I think your point is valid. They won't tell you they're unhappy because they think they can't parent up, Bob. They can't look at you and say, so here's some things I think you should improve. You might be open to the feedback, but that's not the world that we've all been trained in. And then also you can say, I'm really open to feedback, but I've had jobs where people said, we want to hear your ideas. And then you give an idea and they don't like it and you feel stupid, or worse, you give an idea and it's better than your managers or something. And now they've got issues and they're reacting that you made them look foolish because your idea was better. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I confused with what you said was what you meant. And so there's all this history and dynamics and corporation stuff that they bring as luggage. And so we just do it completely different. So it's even more powerful than that, but it is incredibly profound.
So in your business, I think this is one of the questions I like to ask people quite often, because it almost always surprises me, the answer. Opportunity tends to come to us through one of 4 doors. It can come through proactive outbound sales activity. It can come through relationships and referrals. It can come through ads, or it can come through content marketing. And I would include social media to an extent in that. What does that typically look like to you? How does work most naturally land on your door?
I think that's another great question, because what happens with the people I work with is they all are isolated and they all think they're the only one. And they all firmly believe that, well, once I get past this next thing, we just got to get that client on board. We just got to get through this. I just have to get this thing launched after next month's webinar. There is always something. Once I get blank, 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 right? And so they don't even understand that until they hear me going on like a crazy person on all the podcasts or social media. So I'm very lucky. I meet people through, opportunities like this where they have a sincere conversation with me and they either, like yourself, Bob, become a client, refer me to somebody else. I have clients that come from referrals. Oh my gosh, I could just tell how fast you're talking and how you messed up the time on the calendar. You need to meet Kris. It really does come at me from different ways. I definitely put content out on social media all day, every day. So it's really just spreading the gospel, and they come from all different avenues.
It's interesting because often the answer you've given me is the best one, because the most successful people I know, they have all the bases covered. They do proactive outbound, they do ads, they do content, and people refer them because word spreads when you're good. A lot of the time, I find that there is one that dominates. And what you described again is, I suspect, referrals dominate. And that's actually the most common when you're good.
Yeah.
The other question I like to ask is when I meet really competent people who have niched in, like you have, I like to be super nosy and ask, okay, competent person, where do you struggle the most? Of all of the things that you know you should be doing, where's your, maybe not your blind spot, but you know you're neglecting something? I'm always curious.
Wow. Okay. I don't I I don't think I neglect anything per se, because we do have the super toolkits in play in my team because they've been empowered. You know, like you don't get away with anything. We're all equal. So they'll say something like, "Oh, that's in the super toolkit." And I think also we didn't even get into this today, but how we use our calendar, it's there's no juggling. Like there's no pretending. I don't have a to-do list because it's all mapped out in the calendar. So I have to be really conscious and clear. Like, so here's an example. When I wrote my book, one of the things I talk about is working backwards. So I had to have my book done by June in order to get it to the editors, and because she had commitments for the summer. And so when I did the math, I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do 5 pages per day, Monday to Friday, to get this done. Now, I do it first thing in the morning, the power hour, the work that requires the most attention or focus first thing in the hour, first thing in the morning. And so, the old way of doing that would be like, oh, I'm going to write this book. It's going to be great. And then you get really busy and you're like, I'm going to write it this afternoon. Oh, today this happened. Good excuse. Got a new client, really busy. Tomorrow the pages will fly off the computer. It'll be amazing. Don't worry about it. It's all fine. But where I worked backwards, and I knew I had to do 5 pages per day. If I felt like I didn't have 5 pages in me today, I had to stop and say, okay, but will I have 10 in me tomorrow? No. So I'm really held accountable like that. And my team is the same. So that makes all the difference. So I do struggle. One thing I struggled with for a long time was doing lives on LinkedIn, because I'm like, oh, who's going to watch these? And you feel like a fool talking to yourself. And I'm better on podcasts with other people, and I have to do the lives myself. And so I would say that, I wanted to do that probably months before I actually did it. But now I figured out a way to systematize that. I'll hint, you can go into StreamYard and pre-record your lives, post them for the week. Also, then I can take clippings from, say, this podcast. You ask such thoughtful questions. And, if I can get the raw file from you, I can have you, Bob, there asking one of your great questions, and then pause it, and then me answer real time, right? So then I'm like, okay, my weakness was I just think I'm not good by myself. You just drone on too much. Well, now I figured out how to maybe interview my team or one of my clients, and then how to take clippings from this podcast and then pre-record it and have it come out as a live. So for me, it's often navigating around my weaknesses, which is what I do with my clients. Is if you think you have this weakness, then you need me even more, because we're going to navigate around it.
What's really interesting listening to that, I reflect quite a lot back to myself. When you are as under control with your time as you are, then those things that you've been avoiding, they become really difficult to avoid. Now you have time for them. You have time to extend your comfort zone. You have time to build systems. You have time to grow. You have time to properly, diligently say yes or no properly, rather than just avoid.
Yeah.
And that comes across really strongly.
Thank you.
So, Kris, if people want to go deeper with you, if they want to find out more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can check us out at free gift, free FREEGIFT, free gift from Kris, KRIS.com, free gift from Kris.com. I put a couple of goodies in there for your audience, Bob. I put a free audio version of my book. It won't be there very long, so grab it. I also put in, it's really fun, a business personality. I'm a recovering rushaholic. That's a whole nother show, but you can check out within seconds what your personality is, what your superpower is, what your kryptonite is, and how to work around that. That's all kinds of fun and very insightful. People tell me all the time, how'd you get in my head? So free gift from Kris.com.
I am going to have to go and look at that. I'm off away on a road trip soon, so that's maybe what I'll be listening to, because I think many of the things we've discussed today are my Achilles heel. So I'm very grateful for your time.
Well, I know somebody that can help you, Bob.
Well, I believe you do. And I will have to have you back, because we haven't spoken about personal productivity at all. And you can't just shove everything off your desk. No. A lot of it still needs to get done by you. And one of the biggest problems with free time is effectively filling it. So
Yeah.
if you're all right, I would love to have you back to talk about that.
I could do a 6-part Netflix series on that. Let me tell you.
Kris, I've been very, very entertained. I think you are very much the yin to my yang, bringing the high energy where I tend to go low. For now, thank you very much. I do need to ask you one last question. What's one thing you do now you wish you started 5 years ago?
One thing I do, 5 years ago, I was already doing this, but I would say the first couple of years of my business would have been a hell of a lot easier had I started, building my team sooner. So it was just wasted energy. It was years of exhaustion, grinding it out, thinking that I was doing something noble at all costs to build my business. And I had no idea in the world that all the effort I put in was completely counterproductive. And that when you see those people online telling you these wonderful stories how they slept on a mattress in their apartment, they're up to 2 o'clock in the morning doing all these things, they're telling you that part of the story, but where the story really takes form, where the transition happens, is when they get a team, when they start putting streamlined processes in play. That's when they got out of that situation. But they don't tell you that because it's not as sexy or interesting or dynamic. So the suffering is not part of the journey, and it's unnecessary. And more than anything, you need to hear me now, it's counterproductive.
I love that. I read somewhere once that you can only really build wealth in one of two ways. One is amplification, amplifying your value. The other is multiplication, of multiplying your value. And that's really what you facilitate there. And I think it's very, very valuable. That does bring us to the end of another episode. Kris, thank you so much.
Thank you for trusting me with your audience. I had a fantastic time.
Me too. That does bring us to the end of another episode. Thanks at home for listening. If you did enjoy the show, then I would gently encourage you to leave 5-star reviews. Stop and listen. That's 5-star and reviews. Reviews are an actual thing. They make a big difference to podcasters. And obviously share the show with just one person. If you did enjoy the show, then you will love the Personal Brand Business Roadmap. It's 50 pages of everything you need to start, scale, or fix your expert business. It's 8 p.m. for me, Kris. Just click the link in the show notes or visit amplifyme.agency/roadmap. Thanks for listening and see you next time.